So, Lil Nas X, the amazing hip-hop artist who is both a musical phenom and a creative cultural icon, found himself once again in some hot water last week. This time, it was with the trans community. So, in a since-deleted tweet, Lil Nas posted a photo of a woman who looked a lot like him alongside the caption that said, "The surgery was a success." Now, some fans reacted really negatively, calling the tweet transphobic for seeming to mock gender transition surgery. So at first, Lil Nas defended the tweet, saying, quote, "But she does look like a woman." Not surprisingly, this made things even worse. Subsequently, Lil Nas pulled the original tweet down and ultimately apologized to the trans community, saying, quote, "Apologies to the trans community. I handled that situation with anger instead of considering why it was not cool. Much love to you guys. Sorry." But the furor wasn't over, because when some commentators and other prominent trans leaders suggested that the apology wasn't enough, Lil Nas once again got defensive and he fanned the flames. So, what's going on here? Was Lil Nas X's apology sincere? Or was it just a public relations or crisis management or kind of a performative stunt? How does one decide? And if apologies are always second-guessed, is the best approach Donald Trump's, which is simply to never apologize, double down, shoot back, and plunge forward? So today, I'm going to break open the Lil Nas apology, and I'm going to use it to answer some very common questions I get asked about apologies in conflict resolution. And if you stick around to the end, I'll share with you a personal story of how a very meaningful apology from a friend many years ago transformed that relationship forever. I'm Bob Bordone. I'm a senior fellow at Harvard Law School. I'm the founder and former director of Harvard Law School's Negotiation and Mediation Clinic. I also run the Cambridge Negotiation Institute. Let's go. Okay, first let me acknowledge that a public apology from a high-profile musical artist like Lil Nas X to a whole class of people like trans people is categorically different from an apology that might happen between individuals in conflict in a relationship. Having said that, there are lots of lessons that actually cut across these contexts. So let me start with this really important point, and that is that in conflict resolution, apologies are very powerful tools. They can resolve a conflict, they can promote healing, they can put a relationship back on a healthy path, and sometimes they even build relationships that were stronger than the ones that were in place before. But let me also say that apologies are also highly risky because they can be turned around and they can be used against you by the person or entity to whom you're apologizing. You know, in law, an apology is even more risky because sometimes the other side, if it wants to, can use your apology as an admission of responsibility or guilt in a lawsuit. In fact, this is one of the problems with our legal system, because we know as conflict resolution experts that apologies go a very long way to restoring relationships. And yet the way the legal system is set up, people often are discouraged from apologizing. Now, that's a topic for another video. For now, I'm going to answer some common questions I often get about apologies in conflict resolution and use the Lil Nas example as a way to offer my best advice. So, question number one, how do you know when giving an apology is even appropriate? So first, when you are considering whether or not to apologize, it's really important for you to take time out and think about whether you regret the thing you have done, A, or whether you just regret the impact it has had on the other side. Now, it is important to say that both kinds of apologies can be effective, meaning apologies where you actually regret that you did the thing, or apologies where maybe you don't regret you did the thing, but you are truly saddened that it had an unexpected and negative impact. Now, the situations where you really regret doing the thing or failing to do the thing, those are the easiest to give. It's basically like saying, "It's me, hi, I'm the problem, it's me." But If you only regret the impact of what you've done and not necessarily the fact that you did the thing, that's a little more tricky. So why is that the case? Well, in a situation like this, you have to be careful if you do decide to apologize. Because if your apology sounds something like, I truly did not mean to have this impact on you, but the problem is you, because you are fill in the blank, too sensitive, unnuanced, not able to take a joke, etc., then the apology is likely to backfire, and it'll be seen as condescending or forced or worse. So this, to me, it seems is what happened in the Lil Nas example. Because his first mistake, of course, was initially doubling down. But, to be fair to him, many of us, when we're in a conflict, our first instinct is to be defensive. And then when we have a chance to kind of think it over and to calm down and to consider the impact of what we did, we realize yeah, I could have handled that better. So when he ultimately apologizes for the tweet and takes it down, I think it's reasonable to believe that at the very least, he regrets the impact of what he did. And maybe he regrets the tweet itself. He certainly says he learned something that he didn't know before. The problem is that when he defends himself after people say it hasn't gone far enough, it kind of undermines the impact and it questions the intention of the apology in the first place. The original apology ends up looking a little bit like it was forced or begrudging or insincere, or if none of those, at least quite limited. And so this leads to a second question that I often get, which is, should I apologize to smooth things over, even if I really don't feel sorrow or regret? Now, in conflict resolution, I want to say that the answer to that question is almost always no, for a few reasons. First, saying you're sorry when you're really not sorry is really just being avoidant. And anyone who's been watching this channel knows that to handle conflict well, being avoidant is not the way to go. But secondly, even if the immediate effect of an apology you don't feel might be to smooth things over, I would say that the long-term effect is quite corrosive because it tends to build resentment in you. And frankly, if the other person is emotionally intuitive, they'll start to see that resentment and they'll start to see the insincerity. And that will erode the relationship over time. Trust will be diminished, partisan perceptions will come into place, and the communication will worsen. Now, I want to say that there's probably a narrow set of circumstances in which case an apology may make sense, even if you don't actually feel sorrow. So what are those circumstances? Well, if you find yourself in some sense trapped or stuck in a situation where it's time limited, the relationship isn't going to go beyond the time, and somehow you need to find a way to get by with somebody, then it may make sense to apologize. So let me give you a real example. Some years ago, I was working with a team of colleagues in a foreign country. And without getting into a lot of specifics, let's just say that one of the people on the team was extremely difficult to work with. Defensive, blame shifting, accusing, somewhat paranoid. And we had to make it through 5 days, including a long cross-country car ride. Actually, not a car ride. We were in a van together. And at some point, it occurred to me that this relationship was not going to exist beyond this particular project, that we had to make it through somehow, and that the better way was simply to apologize at all times and frankly be avoidant to make it to the end. In most of our relationships in life, that situation isn't in place, but in rare circumstances like that, it may make sense to apologize even if you don't feel it. So let me now get to the last question, and I think it's a really important one. It's one that I get asked a lot, which is, what's the point of apologizing in a situation where the other side isn't going to forgive me or isn't going to take my apology as credible or sincere anyway? I think at least some of you, right, you're sitting there thinking, you know what? Lil Nas X's apology was totally sincere. The problem here is that there's a whole bunch of people who will simply never accept an apology. They'll always say this doesn't go far enough, particularly in a current moment where there is a real strong cancel culture feel, a sense that one misstep and you're dead and done forever. Some people will say, There's just no point in apologizing ever. And I would just say, like, this is really the approach taken by former US President Donald Trump. Now, my answer to this question of should I apologize even if the other side won't accept it is a little bit deep, but my own experience and I think research suggests it's the right answer. And it goes to the very heart of what apology is in conflict resolution in the first place. So first, we know it can be useful in terms of healing a relationship across the table with the other side. Sometimes you could be surprised. You think they won't actually accept it, but they will. But let's imagine in those situations where they truly will not hear it or take it as sincere. I want to say that apology is not just about receiving forgiveness or restoration from the person with whom you're in conflict. Because for most of us, if our apology is heartfelt, it's because we've come to think we have wronged someone, or we have done something that was hurtful or upsetting. And in conflict resolution, at the end of the day, the only person over whom we have some control is ourselves. And I would say that when we issue an apology, it actually puts out the possibility of forgiveness or reconciliation or closure, not just with the other, but also with ourselves. And that resolution of an internal conflict, a conflict with our conscience, our sense of self, our integrity, that is at least as valuable as the reconciliation that might occur across the other side with the relationship to the other person. Now, I obviously don't know Lil Nas X at all, but I would say this: if his apology was heartfelt and true, and he really did learn something, it will be easier for him to ignore the kind of vitriol or hate or criticism that comes from others who just frankly are not in a place to accept apology, or those who will say it's fake or forced. He knows he's done something right, and that's all that matters. And that is valuable. So this leads to this last story I want to share with you. This is a true story of an apology that really transformed a relationship for me. So this occurred many years ago. I was traveling with a straight male friend, and during our trip on various times, different people thought that he and I were a couple. And every single time this came up, my friend seemed a little bit uncomfortable or upset. And so finally I said to him, gosh, every time someone thinks we're a couple, you seem uneasy. Like, am I that unattractive or undesirable? And he's like, no, it's just really weird. I was like, huh. I was like, well, what's weird about it? And he's like, I don't know, just weird. And I said, oh, okay. I said, well, I've seen that happen with you and our mutual friend, Cindy. Cindy, by the way, is a woman. And you don't seem weirded out by it. And then he paused for a second. He said, you're right. And I'm sorry. I actually think it's kind of some internalized homophobia. I didn't mean to hurt you. And I'm going to work on that. And I said, thanks, that means a lot. And I have to say, it's not that this friendship would not have continued if that apology didn't happen, but that apology deepened our friendship. It was a moment of vulnerability and connection and honesty that really meant a lot to me. And I suspect even if I didn't receive it in that way, there was learning for that person. When you're thinking about apology in a conflict or in a negotiation, it doesn't mean it will always be accepted. But I would say that when it's heartfelt, it's always valuable to do. Not everyone is going to accept Lil Nas X's apology. I hope most people will give him the benefit of the doubt. So if you want to learn more about the role of apology in conflict and negotiation, watch this next video, which is called How is Forgiveness Part of Conflict Resolution? Also, I am not going to apologize. If you have not subscribed to my channel yet, I really ask you to do that. Also, be sure to like this video and ring the bell so you won't miss any other content. Okay, no apologies here. Binge watch this content. Click, click, click.